Let us look at Vim macros. The dot repeat command can repeat only the last change. Also, it gets overwritten with every change. Instead, if you use the Q command, you can record a sequence of commands and execute them later whenever you need. You can also make it recursive, add a count prefix, combine it with command line mode commands, and so on. It is very powerful indeed. With so many built-in features, sometimes it might become difficult to choose. I prefer using the substitute command over macros if both of them can be used for a given problem, especially if the processing does not require multiple lines to be considered at once for the solution. That said, macros are definitely more flexible and have an inherent advantage of being able to integrate numerous Vim commands. You can go through the help topics 10.1 for user manual for record and playback commands, and you can go through complex hyphen repeat for reference manual for queue and related commands. Let us look at a rough overview of macro usage. Detailed examples will be discussed later. So there are 5 steps. To start the recording, you have to press Q. So this is in normal mode, by the way. Then you can use any alphanumeric character as a register to store the recording. So let's say you choose the alphabet A. After that, you can execute the command sequence to accomplish the required task. Once that is done, press Q again to stop the recording. To apply this macro elsewhere, you have to use at followed by the register you used in step 2. So A in this case. You can give a count prefix. So for example, 5 at A will execute the macro 5 times. Once you have executed a macro, you can use at to repeat that macro henceforth. So let us look at a very simple example to show these steps. So I'm going to delete this command. I'm going to delete this line and then paste it. So this line will come below this line. So I'm going to use the letter A to record it. So let's follow the steps. Q and then A. So you can see recording will appear in the command line area, and then we need to execute the commands to accomplish the required task. So I'm going to press DD. So that line is deleted. And now if I use P, that line will be pasted. So basically, when you execute the macro on a particular line, it will be moved one line down. So our task is completed. We need to press Q to stop the recording, and you can see that recording message is not present anymore. So the recording is done. Now if I execute the macro on this line, then this will go below this line. So how to do that? We'll press at A. Let us quickly see an example with count prefix. So on this line, I'm going to press 2 at A. So this line should move below this line. So that is, you're effectively moving this line 2 times in the downward direction. So 2 at A. Let's undo that. Note that these registers are shared across recording, delete, and yank commands. You will see how this helps to modify a recording in later examples. But you should also be careful not to mix them if you want separate recording and paste use cases. Also, as we saw earlier in the normal mode chapter, using uppercase registers will append to existing content in lowercase registers. Let us look at a basic macro recording example that clears text till end of the word and inserts hello. I'll record the macro on this word and then I'll explain each of the steps again. First I'll press Q to start the recording. W is the register I'm using to save the recording. CE clears till end of the word. And then I type the characters I need, press escape and then press Q again to complete the recording. So here's a breakdown of this macro. Q starts the recording. W is the register chosen to save this macro. The command we are using to change till end of the word is CE. Hello are the characters that are to be inserted. And when you press escape, this is the representation you get. You should not type these two characters separately. This is just a representation for the escape key. So for example, if I use double quotes W and P, it will paste the contents of that register. So here you can see this particular combination of two characters is used to represent the escape key. And then finally Q is pressed to stop the recording. After you have recorded the macro, you can execute this command sequence anywhere else you need it. For example, if the cursor is on this particular character and I use @W, you can see it clears till end of the word and inserts hello. Let us see how to modify a recorded macro. As mentioned earlier, registers are shared across recording, delete, and yank commands. When you call a macro using @, the register content is treated as the sequence of commands to be executed. So, editing a register's content will automatically update the behavior of the macro as well. Knowing that you can modify a macro also helps if you make a mistake. You can choose to finish the recording and update later instead of restarting the recording. Let us look at an example. Suppose we want to use hello surrounded by single quotes and added exclamation mark instead of just plain hello for the example we saw earlier. So that was recorded in the register W. Let us see how to modify that. So there are 3 steps. First, you need to paste the content of the register, modify the text as needed, and then update the register. So let me first paste the contents. So double quotes, W is the register, and then paste. So instead of this hello, we need to change it to this. So let's add the extra characters. And once the modification is complete, we can update the register. So double quotes, W and yank. Let's verify if the modified register content is working as expected. So suppose the cursor is here and if I use @W, so you can see it now has the modified text. If you want to create a new macro from scratch, you can just type the required text instead of using the Q command. In such cases, you can use Ctrl V or Ctrl Q to insert non-graphic characters like escape and enter. So for example, I'll press Ctrl Q and then press escape. So you can see the escape character is inserted. Another example, Ctrl Q and enter. You can also load a macro at startup. So to do that, you can use let and at followed by the register and assign it to the contents you want to execute as a macro. Let us look at another macro example. Suppose you forgot to add curly braces for single statement control structures in a Perl program. So here's an example of the syntax error. The aim is to add curly braces around this print statement. So let us record this macro. Let's press Q to start recording the macro. I'll choose the letter P and let's open a new line. Insert opening curly brace. Go back to normal mode. Move a line down. Open another line and insert the closing curly brace. Let's go back to normal mode and finish the recording by pressing Q again. Let us check if the macro works. So cursor is on this while loop. Let's press at P. It should insert curly braces around the print statement. And yes, it works. So let's go back. So these are the steps we followed in recording this macro. Press Q to start recording. P is the alphabet we chose to record. O opens a new line. And then in insert mode, we typed opening curly brace. Pressed escape to go back to normal mode. J to move a line down. Open another line. Insert closing curly brace. Go back to normal mode and then stop recording. Having such macro will help you to apply this correction whenever you forget braces for single statement control structures. One thing to note is the indentation applied to these curly braces when we used the O command depends on the style settings for that particular file type. If you note, the extension is .pl, which is a Perl file. So these curly braces were inserted properly. Let us look at another macro example. This is a real world use case I had while writing the Vim reference guide. Suppose the cursor is somewhere within this text portion. I needed to convert this into this corresponding markdown format for hyperlinks. So this portion remains the same. The backticks are converted to square brackets and then the URL is added later. So before executing this macro, I would select the URL from the browser. So this is one way to execute this macro. Let me show the examples. First, let me select the URL and then let me record the macro. So Q, I'll select the register A. First, I need to move to the starting backtick. So uppercase F followed by backtick. I'll replace with opening square bracket and then move to the ending backtick. Replace it with closing square bracket and parenthesis. Go back to normal mode and then paste the contents of the star register. So double quotes star and uppercase P and then Q to finish recording. So let me select another URL. Cursor is somewhere within this portion and then I press at A. So you can see those backticks are replaced with square brackets, and then this particular selected portion is added within the parenthesis characters. Let us see how we can combine motion and filter commands to apply a macro multiple times. Adding a motion command to the end of a macro helps if you need to apply macros to text portions that are next to each other. Let us look at an example. So these are Python function definitions that have been written as single lines. We need to convert them into multiple lines. Let me show the required output. So you can see function definition and statements are in separate lines. Let's go back. Let us see how we can record this macro and add a motion command at the end so that we can use a count prefix for applying the macro to text portions that are next to each other. So let me start the recording. I'll use the register D, move to the start of the line by pressing 0, and then move to the colon character by using F and colon. Next, let us use the L command to move to the right, and let's use R command to replace the space with new line. We need to indent this line, so we'll press right arrow twice, open a new line, go back to normal mode, and then press J to move one line down. Let's stop the recording. So now if I use @D, it will convert this line into these three lines, and then the cursor will automatically move to the next line as well. So instead of applying the macro for this line and this line separately, I can simply use 2 @D. So in this way, we can apply count prefix to the macro if we take care of adding motion commands while recording the macro. But suppose these Python function definitions are not next to each other. In such cases, if we can reliably identify the lines using a regular expression filter, then we can use the :G command. So first we'll record a simplified macro. We don't need 0 to move to the start, since the cursor will automatically start at the beginning of the line, and we don't need the motion command. So let me show a demo here. Start the recording. We'll use the register D. So move forward to the colon character, L, replace space with new line, indent the line, open a new line, go back to normal mode and quit recording. So this particular definition is already modified. These two are remaining. So if we can filter such lines, so one difference between this and these two definitions is that there is a space character after this colon. So now we have identified the lines to modify. We can apply normal and @D. So let's go back. And yet another solution is using regular expressions. So we saw how to use the S command with regular expressions earlier. We can identify the lines starting with def, having a colon character and a space. So this portion is not modified. So we can set start of match, and then we can capture rest of the line. In replacement, So this space is not part of this capture group. So that will be deleted. In replacement, we have a new line, indentation provided by a tab character, back reference to this captured portion, and another new line. Previously, we saw how we can combine motion and filtering commands to apply a macro on multiple text portions. Recursive recording is another way to apply the macro automatically for all the matching text parts. Similar to recursive function calls, we have to call the macro from within the recording. We'll look at the same transformation which we saw earlier. So we need to convert these single line Python definitions to multiple lines. This part of the macro is exactly the same which we saw earlier. The only difference here is we are adding a macro call within the recording itself. So let us see how this works. First, we are going to clear the R register. So to do so, you can use Q, the register you want to clear, followed by Q immediately. So essentially, we are recording a empty macro. After that, we can record our actual macro. So Q, R, move to the start of the line, go forward to the colon character, move to a character right, replace with new line, indent the line, open a new line, go back to normal mode, go one line down, and now we are going to call this macro itself. So at R, and then we can quit. So now if I use at R, it should automatically change this single line to multiple lines, move one line down, and apply the macro again. So once this function is modified, it will go to this line and apply the macro again. So what will happen? It will fail because once it goes to the start of the line, it will try to search for a colon character in the line, which is not found, and hence the macro will stop. So at R. So as mentioned earlier, for recursive recording, you must first empty the register you want to use for the recording. If you use the substitute command as part of the recursive recording and you do not want the macro to stop if a search pattern is not found, you can use the E flag.